Okay, so here's the proposition I'm going to begin with. There is an animal with a spiritual problem. That animal is the human being. But before there could be a human being with a spiritual problem, there had to be a language. Because this is, after all, a proposition which I'm making here. It's a problem that exists only for an animal with a language. Otherwise, the question or the problem couldn't have been posed at all. And so this means then that the fundamental question underlying everything is the question of language. Before we can ask, what is the human being? What is the good? What is the true? What is the beautiful? What is the way, the path, the Dharma? We have to ask, what is the language with which these things might be spoken? How is it that the human animal speaks? And what does that speech offer the human animal? For most of the history of at least Western philosophy, speech was the soul, which is why many philosophers thought that only human beings have souls, while animals don't. Or at least this is the modern conception of nature as vacuous of purpose, direction, intelligence, or creativity. And instead, the belief that somehow only speaking, rational human beings have a soul. And maybe we don't call it that anymore if we're secular, but we certainly think that there is a right way to think, and that you are fully human when you think that way. When you think that, say, democracy and capitalism are the best forms of government and the best form of economy that are possible. If you're secular, I mean, you could be a communist too, of course. You could be a socialist or an anarchist. You could be a lot of things. But you're still saying that there is one, if not perfect way of being a human being, at least one best way. And that human beings that behave in that way have this special something. May as well call it a soul. But the point is, the idea of a soul, of something existing separate from our immediate experience as a body in a world, among others, we had to have a language. And the language allows us to abstract ourselves from the system of relationships we find around us. I've been reading Ernst Cassirer, and his philosophy of symbolic forms, which is what he calls it, is an attempt to define the human being as the linguistic animal, and define language as perception through forms, through certain principles which structure our experience as human beings. And he's a neo-Kantian, so the idea is that these underlying structures are somehow a projection of our mind, our conscious experience, rather than a fundamental property of reality itself. As a Kantian, Cassirer is taking this transcendental stance, saying that there is this consciousness thing which is irreducible. And so to try to understand the world independent of it is out of the question. It's impossible. And my struggle is to understand how this differs from Whitehead's approach, which is that it's a kind of realism rather than a Kantian idealism, an empiricism, you could say, even though Whitehead rejects Hume's um, form of empiricism, or sensationalism it's called technically, which is that basically the most primitive elements of our experience are just bare sensa, unordered, random patches of sensation, whether patches of color or certain tactile qualities or sounds, but they have no meaning until some mysterious activity of the mind assumes meaning. Um, Whitehead rejects that that's the basic foundation of human experience, and instead says that we feel the world as already ordered when we sense it. So we're not getting a raw, meaningless signal from it. We're getting something which is certainly complex, but also arrives from a certain direction. It gives us a certain feeling which we can understand. It's meaningful. And what our bodies do is they sort out which meaning is most important in this overwhelming gift that we're offered by everything that surrounds us. Because it's so overwhelming, we have to narrow it down, we have to reflect on it and draw our attention towards something specific. And that's what the physiology of the body does. The gross senses collect this energy from the surrounding universe and transform it into our experience, our identities. And that, as a human being, our identity is a very mysterious and complicated thing, of course. It's not just one simple, it's not an ego, certainly. We can't really say what it is. But we know with our language that there appears to be something worth describing about how this whole process works. But then, see, that's the rub, because we're back to language again. We think of language as just this empty vessel for us to exchange meaning. But really, what we think of as an idea, the signified, has very little to do with the signifier, with the word that we use or the sentence that we use to convey it. And so already to speak a language is to invent as many problems as you could ever solve. But then maybe this is just a wrong picture of language, and instead of thinking of it as a medium for posing problems, we could see it as a method of poetry, of creating worlds, which different worlds will have different obstacles to overcome, and different glories to achieve, and depending on the form that we breathe reality into as human beings using our language, the metaphors that we mold our relationship to each other and the world through, we will experience a different reality. So it's almost a collective responsibility, because language, one thing I haven't mentioned in this video is that language is also collective, so we learn it from each other. We speak it to share with one another. But somehow it's not ours. It's not mine, at least, as an individual. Somehow it exists in between us, and only in between us. The language that I've spoken means nothing unless you've understood it. And I'm sure it means something different to each one of you who have understood it. But I need some response. So let me know what you think.